Welcome to HOA Story Speaker, your daily destination for powerful, shocking, and real-life inspired HOA stories.
My HOA president, Brenda Hutchinson, broke into my home the very week I was away attending my grandmother's funeral. She rifled through every room, stole my grandma's wedding jewelry, and photographed my bank statements and private medical records. All of it because I planted wildflowers instead of grass. For 8 years, Brenda had ruled our neighborhood like a tyrant, issuing illegal fines to veterans, harassing elderly residents, and terrorizing anyone who dared question her petty rules. This time she believed she'd gotten away with it. What she didn't know was that after her last threat, I'd installed hidden 4K cameras in every room of my house. When she finally saw what those cameras captured, her face drained of color. Her hands shook as she begged. One entitled HOA Karen destroyed everything she'd built, her reputation, her power, her entire life, all over a few flowers. Drop a comment if you hate HOAs. What would you have done? Comment your state below. Texas and Florida, I see you. My name is Xavier Kellerman, and 6 months ago I thought I was just planting flowers. I had no idea I was about to go to war with the most vindictive woman in Colorado. I'm 47, a recently retired military logistics officer turned freelance consultant. After 18 years of bouncing between army bases, I finally settled into my grandmother's 1962 ranch house in Willowbrook Estates, Colorado. The neighborhood felt frozen in time, tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes, neighbors actually waving hello. Grandma Martha's home sat in the original section of the subdivision, back when deed restrictions made sense instead of reading like prison rules. Her climbing roses perfumed the morning air with a honey-sweet scent that blended with crisp mountain breeze and the rich smell of Colorado soil after summer rain. But her Kentucky bluegrass lawn was bleeding me dry. $300 a month just to keep it green in a high desert climate. So I researched native wildflowers, pulled the proper permits, and began converting the yard to drought-resistant plants that actually belonged here. The scrape of my shovel against clay, wind chimes softly ringing, visions of purple lupins and orange paintbrush blooms. It was going to be beautiful. That's when I met our neighborhood dictator. Brenda Hutchinson, 52, had ruled Willowbrook's HOA for 8 years with the iron confidence of someone who'd never faced real authority. Real estate agent by day, petty tyrant by obsession, always dressed in business casual, blonde bob perfectly styled, acting like she was closing million-dollar deals instead of harassing retirees over mailbox colors. Her white Lexus SUV stalked the streets like a patrol car, and everyone knew to disappear when it appeared. On day 3 of my project, I was lost in the rhythm of garden work when I heard the sharp click of designer heels on concrete. What exactly do you think you're doing? That voice, fake politeness sharpened into a weapon. I stood up, brushed dirt from my hands, and explained calmly that I was converting to native plants to save water and support local wildlife. Her face twisted like she'd bitten into something sour. That garden is unacceptable here. We have standards, Mr. Kellerman. From Mrs. Elise next door, I'd already learned Brenda's game. She targeted elderly homeowners and military families, harassed them until they sold, then swooped in as their real estate agent to collect both sides of the commission. 3 older neighbors were already gone. But she chose the wrong house this time. I pulled out my research folder and explained that the original 1962 CC&Rs explicitly allowed natural landscaping appropriate for Colorado's climate, and my property was grandfathered in. Her expression shifted instantly, confusion giving way to anger, then something colder. I had just told the queen of her little kingdom that she had no power over me. We'll see about that, she said, each word landing like ice. As her Lexus rolled away, the smell of exhaust mixed with my grandmother's roses, a bitter warning in the air. She slowed just long enough to photograph my garden, her eyes calculating in the rearview mirror. Mrs. Elise appeared at her fence holding homemade cookies, worry etched into her 78-year-old face. That woman's been trying to run us old-timers out for years, she whispered. Be careful, Xavier. She doesn't like being told no. I should have listened. I should have realized I'd just declared war on someone who'd spent 8 years perfecting the art of ruining lives, one violation notice at a time. 1 week later, the first notice arrived in my mailbox like a formal declaration of war. Notice of architectural violation, unapproved landscaping modifications, printed in aggressive red ink on expensive letterhead. According to Brenda's brand new Emergency Architectural Review Committee, my wildflower garden violated 17 aesthetic standards that seemed to appear overnight. The penalty was brutal, a $100 daily fine starting immediately, plus $1,800 to rip out my plants and reseed with bluegrass. The paper felt heavy, designed to make people surrender. But after 18 years in military bureaucracy, I knew something was rotten. That afternoon I called the county clerk. Colorado law requires HOAs to give 30 days notice before creating new architectural rules, and they must file documentation with county records. It exists to stop exactly this kind of ambush. Brenda had filed nothing. Her violation notice was legally worthless. That evening, I walked the neighborhood with my camera as golden hours softened everything. Kids playing, sprinklers throwing rainbows, barbecue smoke drifting through honeysuckle. Then I reached Brenda's house at 1247 Maple Street. An unpermitted deck jutted 3 feet past setback limits. A privacy fence towered 8 inches too high. And front and center, an elaborate decorative boulder garden, never approved by her own committee. The hypocrisy was overwhelming, metallic and bitter. Back in my grandmother's kitchen, surrounded by legal papers and the familiar scent of her lavender sachets, I drafted my response. Military precision meets small-town warfare. Dear board members, I typed, asking for documentation proving the committee's legal formation. I hand-delivered copies to every board member, the slam of my truck doors echoing in the evening air. Certified mail for the record. Because in legal battles, paperwork is everything. 3 days later, as I watered my lupin seedlings in the soft morning light, Mrs. Elise hurried over, clutching a photocopied flyer. Her weathered hands shook just enough to notice as she slipped it through the fence. Kellerman property lowering your home values, screamed the headline above grainy, unflattering photos of my half-finished garden. The anonymous author claimed my weed patch would attract rodents, slash property values by 15%, and destroy our family-friendly community image. Every mailbox in Willowbrook had received this literary gem. The beautiful part was I recognized the typography instantly. Same surf-style font as Brenda's real estate flyers, identical color palette, even her trademark grammatical mistake of mixing up its and its. She had essentially signed her name to this defamation campaign. That weekend's HOA board meeting felt like walking into a pressure cooker. The community center basement reeked of burnt coffee and institutional carpet, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. 32 neighbors crammed into folding chairs, the biggest turnout in years, and the tension was thick in the recycled air. Brenda launched a full PowerPoint attack titled, Protecting Willowbrook Standards. Slide after slide showed cherry-picked property value studies, photos of neighborhoods supposedly destroyed by unchecked landscaping, and carefully cropped images making my garden look like a war zone. When her performance ended with scattered applause, I stood with my own prepared materials, complete packets for everyone in the room. Colorado HOA statutes, records of Brenda's violations, proof of her illegal committee, and forensic analysis of her flyer fonts. Mrs. Hutchinson, I said, my voice carrying the calm authority drilled into me during military briefings, can you explain why your property has 3 unpermitted modifications while you're demanding $20,800 in fines for my legal garden? The silence stretched like a taut wire. You could hear the projector fan whining, someone shifting nervously in a metal chair, distant traffic humming beyond the walls. Brenda's face flushed red, then drained pale before settling into icy fury. Those improvements were grandfathered in. County records show your deck was built in 2019, I replied, 2 years after you became HOA president. That's when Lloyd Brennan, her treasurer and loyal ally, cleared his throat uneasily. Actually, Brenda, maybe we should table this until we review Xavier's documentation more carefully. Even her inner circle was cracking. The meeting collapsed into chaos, neighbors arguing, accusations flying, suburban politeness peeling away like old paint. As people streamed into the parking lot, Brenda cornered me near the exit doors. Her whisper carried peppermint gum and barely restrained rage. This isn't over, Mr. Kellerman. Not even close. 2 weeks later, I woke up to war in my front yard. Someone had spent the night systematically destroying my wildflower garden. Sprinkler heads twisted off, delicate lupin seedlings ripped from the soil. Weeks of careful work lay scattered and glistening with morning dew. The metallic bite of broken irrigation mixed with the raw smell of torn earth, hitting me like a physical blow. Standing there in pajamas and work boots, surveying the damage, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about flowers anymore. This was about bullies who believed darkness made them invisible. Fortunately, I'd learned to think like them. After Brenda's threat, I'd quietly installed security cameras around the property. Nothing obvious, just motion-activated units hidden among surviving plants and one high-definition camera disguised as a decorative birdhouse my grandmother would have loved. The footage told a compelling story. At 2:30 a.m. Lloyd Brennan's unmistakable Ford pickup crept down my street with its headlights off. But Lloyd wasn't driving. The figure that emerged was smaller, hooded, and moved with unmistakably feminine precision through my garden. She knew where every sprinkler head sat, which plants were most vulnerable, and how to avoid the motion sensors I'd placed too obviously. Brenda had memorized every detail during her first inspection, saving it for this moment. I spent the morning replanting what I could, my hands moving on instinct while my mind planned. The cool Colorado soil felt grounding between my fingers, each rescued seedling a small victory. Mrs. Elise App arrived with coffee and homemade banana bread, more comforting than she realized. "This has to stop, Xavier," she whispered, glancing toward Brenda's house. "She's turning the neighborhood into a war zone." That afternoon brought another escalation. Professionally designed flyers appeared in every mailbox with surgical timing. Kellerman's Dangerous Garden. Protecting Our Children featured high-resolution photos and expert quotes about wildflowers attracting aggressive wildlife and disease. The production quality was impressive, but Brenda made a fatal mistake. The digital metadata embedded in the images matched the camera settings from her real estate website exactly. Same lens, same auto settings, same subtle color profile. Every photographer leaves a fingerprint, and hers was everywhere. The real shock came when I dug into HOA finances. Colorado law gives homeowners the right to inspect association records, something most people learn too late. What I found made my coffee taste like ash. Over 18 months, Brenda had billed the HOA for emergency consulting and administrative overflow, phantom services that funneled $18,000 into her personal account. The playground fund was empty. Streetlights were never ordered. Community money flowed straight into Brenda Hutchinson's pocket while she harassed neighbors over mailbox paint. 3 days later, while reviewing footage, I noticed something else. The vandalism began at 2:30 a.m., but motion continued until 3:45. Brenda hadn't just destroyed my garden, she'd spent over an hour photographing the damage from multiple angles, staging evidence for her next move. Then I saw it. During her documentation, she used a small crowbar to pry open my garden shed and sift through my tools. The lock was damaged just enough to look like wear, not a break-in. She was probing my security, learning my habits, preparing for something worse. The next HOA meeting felt like a courtroom where I was both defendant and prosecutor. 47 neighbors packed the community center, the largest crowd in years. Tension hung thick, metallic like air before a storm. Brenda arrived armored for battle, tailored suit, fresh manicure, legal pad filled with notes. Her presentation focused on safety concerns, showcasing enlarged photos of my damaged property taken after her own vandalism. When my turn came, I connected my laptop, hand steady. First slide showed crystal clear footage of Brenda destroying my garden. Second slide revealed metadata linking her to the anonymous flyers. Third slide displayed 18 months of fraudulent transactions. The room fell deathly quiet except for the projector's hum. "This isn't about garden safety," I said, letting every word land. "This is about harassment, vandalism, and embezzlement that's been poisoning this community for years." Then came the moment that changed everything. From the back row came a voice I didn't recognize at first. "Brenda, isn't that you in the video? That's definitely your car." Not Lloyd, not Stella, not one of her loyal allies. It was Sandra Walsh, 43, a mother of two who usually stayed far away from neighborhood politics. Her question hung in the air like a bomb with a slow fuse, because suddenly everyone in that room could see exactly what I'd been seeing. Brenda Hutchinson, caught in crystal clear detail, committing criminal vandalism against my property. "That's not," Brenda stammered, "the lighting makes it difficult to," her composure cracking like old paint. "It's you, Brenda," Sandra said, her voice growing steadier. "My daughter's bedroom window faces Xavier's house. She watched you destroy his garden and was too scared to tell anyone." The community center exploded like a shaken soda bottle. 47 neighbors found their voices at once, years of bottled-up frustration finally breaking free. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as accusations flew across the room like artillery fire. Sandra Walsh's daughter had seen everything. A 12-year-old with insomnia had become the key witness to Brenda's midnight vandalism, and now the entire neighborhood knew it. "This meeting is over," Brenda shrieked, yanking the projector cord from the wall and plunging us into partial darkness. Her designer heels clattered against the linoleum as she fled for the exit, dragging her rolling briefcase behind her like a wounded animal. But Lloyd Brennan wasn't finished. He stood slowly, his face gray with a mix of relief and terror. "Brenda, we need to talk about the money," he called after her. "All of it." The consulting fees, the emergency assessments, the playground fund. She spun around, her perfectly styled hair finally slipping into chaos. "Shut your mouth, Lloyd. Right now. I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice gaining strength with every word. "I've been covering for you for 2 years and I'm done. These people deserve to know where their money went." The silence that followed tasted like copper pennies and fear. Mrs. Elise gripped my arm with surprising strength, her weathered fingers trembling against my sleeve. Outside, the parking lot lights threw long shadows through the windows, shadows that seemed to sway with anticipation. Over the next week, the neighborhood felt like a powder keg with a lit fuse. Brenda went completely silent. No violation notices, no anonymous flyers, no predatory patrols in her white Lexus. The sudden quiet was more unsettling than her harassment ever was, like the eerie calm before a tornado touches down. But I knew she was planning something. The only question was what? The answer came on a Thursday morning when my phone rang with news that flipped my world upside down. It was my grandmother's best friend Eleanor, calling from a hospice center in Denver. "Marcus, honey, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your grandmother took a turn for the worse last night. The doctors don't think she has much time left. Grandma Martha, the woman who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8, who taught me how to plant gardens, stand my ground, and never let bullies win. She'd been fighting cancer for 6 months, but I thought we had more time. I need to be there," I said, my voice sounding strange in the sudden quiet of her kitchen. "I'm leaving today." "Of course, dear," Eleanor said softly. "She's been asking for you." I spent the afternoon in a fog of grief and logistics, packing clothes that still smelled faintly of her lavender sachets and calling my consulting clients to cancel the next 10 days of work. Mrs. Elise promised to collect my mail and watch the house, her lined face creased with sympathy. "That woman won't dare try anything while you're dealing with family," she assured me. "Even Brenda Hutchinson has some limits." How wrong we both were. As I loaded my truck for the 5-hour drive to Denver, I spotted Brenda's Lexus parked across the street, engine running. She was talking animatedly on her phone, gesturing sharply toward my house. The late afternoon sun flashed off her windshield, hiding her expression, but I could feel her watching as I drove away, a cold knot settling in my stomach that had nothing to do with grief. The next few days blurred together in hospital rooms and hard conversations. Grandma Martha held on longer than expected, her grip still strong when she squeezed my hand. "Don't let them win, Xavier," she whispered during one lucid moment, her voice thin but fierce. "Bullies only understand one language. Make sure you speak it fluently." She passed away peacefully on a Tuesday evening, surrounded by antiseptic air and the soft beeping of machines that couldn't stop time. I held her hand until it grew cold, whispering promises about the garden, the neighborhood, and keeping her memory alive in wildflowers. Funeral arrangements filled the rest of the week, choosing flowers she would have loved, writing a eulogy that captured her strength, coordinating with relatives I hadn't seen in years. Outside the funeral home, the crisp mountain air smelled of pine and snow, a clean scent that stripped everything down to the raw truth of loss. It wasn't until Friday evening, 3 days after the service, that I finally checked my phone. 14 missed calls from Mrs. Elise, 6 voicemails from neighbors I barely knew, 3 urgent texts from Sandra Walsh. The last message turned my blood to ice. "Marcus, call me immediately. Brenda broke into your house yesterday. We called the police, but she had some kind of work order. Something's very wrong here. Very, very wrong." I called Mrs. Elise from the funeral home parking lot, my hands shaking as the mountain air cut through my black suit. "Marcus, thank God you called back," she said, her voice raw with exhaustion and anger. "Something terrible happened while you were gone. Tell me everything." Wednesday morning, 2 days after your grandmother's funeral, Brenda showed up with a locksmith and 2 men in safety vests. She had county paperwork and told Officer Martinez it was an emergency habitability inspection. My blood ran cold. The police let her in. The documents looked completely legitimate. Official letterhead, case numbers, everything. "They spent 3 hours inside your house, Xavier. 3 hours going through everything." The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been saying goodbye to Grandma Martha, Brenda had been inside our family home, pawing through decades of memories with her manicured claws. "I saw everything from my kitchen window," Mrs. Elise went on, her voice dropping into a hushed tremor. "This was no inspection. They took photos of your financial papers, your private files, even went through your grandmother's bedroom. And Xavier, when they walked out, Brenda was wearing Martha's pearl necklace." My stomach dropped. Grandma's wedding pearls. 43 years of Sunday church mornings, family portraits, and the promise she'd made that one day they would be mine. She took them. When the officer questioned her, she said they were evidence of hoarding behavior. But Xavier, after they left, I called my nephew Danny at the county. Those inspection forms were completely fake. The county never approved anything. That meant theft, forced entry, forgery, and impersonating government officials. As the first wave of anger cooled into something sharper, it hit me. Brenda had made a catastrophic mistake. She'd committed multiple felonies on camera. The security system I installed wasn't some off-the-shelf setup. 18 years handling sensitive military logistics had taught me how important real documentation was. Hidden cameras covered every room, motion-activated, encrypted cloud storage, audio that met federal evidence standards. Every moment of Brenda's rampage was preserved in courtroom-ready detail. Then something bigger began to surface. Mrs. Elise, tell me about the families who moved away over the last 2 years. The Hendersons. The Moretts. That young military couple on Elm Street. Good people Brenda harassed relentlessly until they sold fast and cheap. Who listed those homes? Silence answered me before understanding set in. Brenda. All of them. She told everyone she was helping them escape HOA trouble by finding quick buyers. And there it was. The whole operation. Coordinated harassment to force distressed sales, then collecting commissions from both sides while families fled. She was cleansing Willowbrook of anyone who challenged her and turning their misery into profit. Marcus, there's more. Yesterday morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door with copied financial records. Someone's been tracking Brenda's embezzlement for years. Playground funds, streetlights, emergency assessments, all routed into her personal accounts. I tightened my grip on the phone as the scale of it finally came into focus. This wasn't petty HOA bullying. This was organized fraud, theft, and extortion stretching across years and dozens of victims. And Brenda had no idea she targeted someone who knew exactly how to build federal cases against criminals like her. 20 years of military legal training hadn't prepared me for HOA politics, but it had taught me how to dismantle people who thought they were untouchable. The cold evening air felt charged with purpose. Brenda Hutchinson had just given me everything I needed to expose her entire empire. And she was about to learn why you never steal from a soldier's family while he's laying his dead to rest. It was time to show her what justice looked like when you stopped playing by her rules. The 5-hour drive back to Willowbrook felt like mission prep. Every mile gave me time to absorb what she'd done. Breaking into my home while I buried my grandmother. Stealing family heirlooms. Committing felonies because she believed grief had made me vulnerable. Pine-scented mountain air poured through the vents, sharp and clean, but beneath it lingered the metallic edge of controlled fury. By the time I crossed into Colorado, the ending was already written. Walking back into my house made the violation feel raw and immediate. Fresh scratches scarred the door lock where her hired thugs forced their way inside. At first glance everything looked untouched, until the details betrayed them. File drawers slightly ajar, papers out of order, the sour trace of cheap perfume clashing with my grandmother's lavender kitchen. But they'd left me a gift. My cameras caught every second in prosecutable clarity. That first night, I reviewed 3 hours of footage that would end Brenda's career. Her directing accomplices to specific files. Photographing my bank records. Sliding grandma's pearls into her designer bag while casually discussing my supposed instability. The audio was flawless. Every whisper, every instruction, every confession captured clean and undeniable. Document everything for the mental health evaluation, her voice said calmly through my speakers. If we prove he's unstable, the county will fast-track a habitability order. She'd recorded her own confession while committing the crimes. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Sandra Walsh stood at my door holding a thick manila envelope, her face set with quiet resolve. Marcus, I owe you an apology, she said, sitting at my kitchen table as I brewed coffee in Grandma's old percolator. The familiar aroma wrapped the room in warmth. My husband's an accountant, and we've been tracking Brenda's finances since we moved here. She spread out spreadsheets detailing 3 years of suspicious transfers. HOA funds siphoned into Brenda's personal accounts through fake consulting fees. Emergency assessments that funded nothing. Vendor invoices for work never done. She's stolen over $52,000, Sandra said tightly. Playground money. Streetlights. Even the Christmas decorations. All pocketed. But her husband had found something worse. Colorado law requires HOA boards to keep full financial records available to homeowners. Most never ask, but when they do, the rules are absolute. Boards must comply within 10 business days or trigger an automatic state investigation. Brenda had ignored that law for years, betting no one knew it existed. That afternoon, Grandma's dining room became an evidence command center. Documents sorted with military precision, each box labeled with charges and proof. Pens scratched across legal pads while the printer churned non-stop, building the paper trail that would end her reign. The strategy was pressure from every direction. Criminal charges for the break-in. A civil suit for emotional distress. State investigations for HOA violations. Federal mail fraud if she used the post for harassment. That evening, Mrs. Elise arrived with homemade soup and more vital insight, her steady hands placing the bowl on my table. The smell of broth filled the kitchen, comfort clashing with the gravity of what we planned. "Marcus," she said softly, "Brenda's been telling everyone you've had a mental collapse from grief. She's called an emergency HOA meeting for tomorrow night to remove dangerous residents from the community." Perfect. She was about to hand herself the perfect public stage for her own downfall. "There's something else," Mrs. Elise added, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret meant only for me. "Lloyd Brennan came by this afternoon. He wants to cooperate. He says he has recordings of Brenda confessing to the embezzlement and laying out plans for the break-in." The bitter taste of violation was slowly replaced by the sharp, metallic flavor of victory. Even the people who once protected her were jumping ship as the true scale of her crimes surfaced. That night, I placed a series of precise phone calls to former military contacts, local reporters, and the Colorado Attorney General's HOA fraud hotline. Each call tightened another strand of the net closing around Brenda Hutchinson. She thought she was playing petty small-town control games, while I was assembling a federal case with real prison consequences. This is what every HOA victim needs to understand. Document everything. Demand financial transparency under state law and never allow boards to operate behind closed doors. Most HOA corruption collapses once exposed to real legal pressure, because board members assume homeowners won't push back with actual knowledge. As I prepared for the next night's confrontation, the cool evening air carried the scent of surviving wildflowers and the quiet promise of mountain justice. Brenda Hutchinson had no idea she was about to learn why you never steal from a veteran's family while he's burying his dead. It was time to show the community what real accountability looked like. Brenda's panic erupted Tuesday morning like a sloppy psychological warfare campaign launched by someone unraveling. I opened my mailbox to find it stuffed with professionally printed flyers carrying a chilling accusation. Kellerman, dangerous veteran in crisis. The glossy paper felt expensive, but the message reeked of desperation. Grainy telephoto shots showed me walking through my own neighborhood. A fake psychiatric evaluation credited to Dr. Patricia Wellness, a licensed therapist who turned out to exist only inside Brenda's imagination. The flyer warned residents about military-trained individuals suffering grief-induced breakdowns and included a hotline to report concerning veteran behavior. The number routed straight to Brenda's real estate office voicemail, inviting confidential tips about my supposed instability. Her timing was deliberate. The flyers were distributed around 4 a.m., avoiding witnesses and perfectly synchronized with her next move. A formal police complaint accusing me of stalking, intimidation, and threats. Detective Maria Santos called that afternoon, her tone calm and exhausted, like someone who'd seen too many neighbor disputes explode. "Mr. Kellerman, I need to speak with you about some serious allegations. Mrs. Hutchinson claims you've been photographing her home, following her car, and making verbal threats. She says she has audio recordings to support this. 18 years of military service teaches you how to stay composed when lies are delivered to law enforcement. Detective, I'd like you to review my full security footage, vehicle GPS data, and unedited recordings of every interaction I've had with Mrs. Hutchinson. I think you'll find them enlightening." That's not the response I usually get to stalking complaints. I'm guessing she forgot to mention breaking into my home during my grandmother's funeral and stealing family jewelry. All captured on high-definition cameras. Silence stretched on the line as Detective Santos recalculated everything. "Mr. Kellerman, we should meet in person." As she headed over to review evidence that would flip the case entirely, I received an urgent call from Mrs. Elise. "Marcus, something awful is happening at the Patterson house. Brenda's there with paperwork and movers." Eleanor Patterson had lost her husband 8 months earlier and survived quietly on Social Security in the home she'd lived in for 38 years. If Brenda was targeting her now, desperation had erased all restraint. I arrived to find Mrs. Patterson crying on her porch while Brenda directed 2 large men loading boxes into a truck. The fall air smelled of dying leaves and raw panic. "Mrs. Patterson, what's going on?" "Oh, Xavier," she sobbed. "The county condemned my house for safety violations. Brenda says I have 48 hours to leave or I'll be prosecuted." The documents shaking in her hands were flawless forgeries, fake county letterhead, fabricated inspector signatures, invented condemnation codes, all designed to terrify an elderly widow into fleeing so Brenda could profit again. "Mrs. Patterson, these papers are fake," I said loudly enough for the movers to hear. "The county has issued no condemnation order. This woman is committing fraud and elder abuse." That's when one mover stepped forward, phone in hand. "Ma'am, we'll need legitimate county documentation before continuing." He's right. Something isn't adding up. Brenda's face flickered through panic, fury, and calculation before freezing into desperation. "You're interfering with official HOA business, Mr. Kellerman. I could have you arrested." "Please call the police," I replied, starting my recording app. "Detective Santos is at my house right now reviewing footage of you stealing my grandmother's jewelry. I'm sure she'd be happy to add elder fraud to the list." The movers suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere, unloading Mrs. Patterson's belongings and apologizing as they left. Brenda stood alone clutching her fake paperwork, the sharp scent of desperation hanging in the mountain air like flowers left to rot. But I wasn't finished. "Mrs. Patterson, would you like to see the real county inspection reports for your home? I pulled them this morning." I handed her the authentic documents showing her property had passed every inspection. Even better, I uncovered something that crushed Brenda. The county had been investigating HOA fraud for 6 months, triggered by my audit request. Brenda went pale as she realized I'd never been on defense. I'd been building a federal case while she thought she was winning. "The district attorney will be very interested in these forged orders," I said calmly. "Federal elder abuse charges come with serious prison time." That evening, neighbors flooded the emergency HOA meeting Brenda had called to discuss my so-called dangerous influence. The parking lot buzzed with outrage over stolen jewelry and fake condemnations. The cold air crackled with a community finally ready to fight back. Inside, 53 furious residents waited for answers they'd been denied for years. Brenda Hutchinson was about to learn what happens when a small-town tyrant pushes too far against someone who knows exactly how to dismantle them legally, completely, and permanently. Walking into that emergency meeting felt like stepping into a courtroom where I was prosecutor, defendant, and key witness all at once. 53 neighbors packed the community center beyond capacity, their angry voices slamming against the cinder block walls like gunfire. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting unforgiving shadows that made every face look worn and ready for war. And more volatile than usual, as the stench of scorched coffee and worn institutional carpet blended with the crackling tension of a neighborhood pushed past its limit. Brenda swept in fashionably late, shadowed by an expensive-looking attorney and wearing the brittle poise of someone whose empire was collapsing but who refused to see the rubble. Her designer suit was flawless, yet I noticed the faint shake in her hands as she aligned legal pads and folders with obsessive care. "Ladies and gentlemen," her lawyer announced, "we're gathered tonight because a disturbed individual has been terrorizing this community with escalating and dangerous behavior. He claimed his client possessed proof of stalking, intimidation, and threats that endangered everyone present." What followed was a PowerPoint masterpiece of manufactured reality. Audio clips edited to remove my replies. Photos of me walking my own streets framed as covert surveillance. Even footage from my home cameras spun into proof of paranoia. When his performance ended amid uneasy, scattered clapping, I rose, connected my laptop to the projector, and the room went dead quiet except for the whir of cooling fans and a nervous cough from the back. "Thank you for that imaginative retelling," I said, my voice steady with the confidence of someone holding every winning card. "Now let me show you what actually happened." The first clip revealed Brenda methodically wrecking my garden at 2:30 a.m., her face glowing in infrared as she snapped sprinkler heads one by one. Shocked gasps spread through the crowd like ripples across glassy water. The second clip hit harder. Crystal clear footage showed Brenda directing her accomplices through my house while I was burying my grandmother, calmly ordering them to photograph bank statements and label normal belongings as hoarding. When she slid Grandma's pearls into her purse, angry murmurs erupted from every corner. The third video was the kill shot. A full confession, recorded during her 3-hour crime spree, openly discussing plans to condemn the property and force a distressed sale she could exploit. "Those recordings are illegal," her attorney blurted, but his protest vanished beneath the roar of the crowd. Then Sandra Walsh stood in the back, her voice slicing through the chaos. "Marcus, show them the financials." I advanced the slide. 18 months of embezzled HOA funds, fake vendor bills, and unauthorized consulting fees funneling straight into Brenda's personal accounts. 53 neighbors realized they'd been stripped of more than $52,000 while their president ruled like a tyrant. "And today's county inspection report?" Sandra pressed. "That sealed it?" Every document Brenda had used to terrorize Mrs. Patterson was confirmed as a forgery. Elder fraud carried federal penalties of up to 20 years, and she'd committed it in plain view. The room exploded. Shouts, resignations, years of buried rage finally bursting free like water through a shattered dam. Brenda sat frozen at the front table, her polished mask fracturing as the magnitude of evidence closed in. That was when Detective Santos entered, her badge and uniform cutting through the crowd like Moses parting the sea. Silence fell as she approached with the deliberate calm of someone who'd reviewed airtight proof of multiple felonies. "Mrs. Hutchinson, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, theft, embezzlement, elder fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." The sharp click of handcuffs echoed like a judge's gavel ending a long, bitter trial. Brenda's pricey attorney suddenly found urgent business elsewhere, scooping up his files as if fleeing a sinking ship. As Detective Santos escorted her past my chair, Brenda finally lost the last shred of control that had defined her 8-year reign. Her voice splintered as she screamed about conspiracies and revenge, but the community center doors slammed shut behind her with a final, satisfying thud that sounded like justice. 53 neighbors stood in stunned quiet, the silence of a nightmare finally over. Ms. Elise rose slowly, gripping her walker, her voice firm as granite. "I nominate Xavier Kellerman for HOA president." All in favor? The unanimous chorus that followed sounded like freedom. Outside, the autumn air carried the sweet scent of surviving wildflowers and the promise of a community ready to heal. Brenda Hutchinson's reign was finished, though rebuilding trust had only begun. Her arrest should have ended it, but 3 weeks later she was out on bail, fighting with the fury of someone whose identity depended on control. She hired the most expensive lawyers money could buy, claiming the evidence was illegal, branding me an unstable veteran on a vendetta, and betting a jury might accept her fantasy. The preliminary hearing was set for Tuesday, but she played one last card. Sunday night, every mailbox received an urgent notice announcing an emergency vote to override her illegal arrest. Total legal nonsense, printed on official-looking letterhead to stir confusion and manufacture support. The meeting was scheduled for Monday night, back in the same hall where she'd been arrested. Local news swarmed in, Channel 7 promising live coverage of what they dubbed the trial of Willowbrook's HOA dictator. The parking lot overflowed with news vans, long-lost neighbors, and curious outsiders drawn by the drama. The air buzzed with anticipation and hot metal from television lights. Inside, cameras lined the walls, reporters gripped notebooks like weapons, and more than 80 residents packed every seat. Under harsh lights, the room felt like a courtroom. Brenda entered as if making a final plea, flanked by 2 attorneys in a conservative suit crafted to scream innocence. Her hair and makeup were perfect, but her hands trembled as she aligned papers too carefully. "Ladies and gentlemen," her lead attorney began, "an innocent woman has been railroaded by a vindictive individual trained in psychological warfare. He framed the evidence as illegal surveillance, my records as obsessive stalking, even my legal knowledge as proof of calculated harassment." When he finished to thin, nervous applause, I stood calmly, the confidence of someone whose conscience was completely clean. "Thank you for that performance," I said, plugging my laptop into the projector for what I already knew would be the last time. "Now let me remind everyone what we're actually dealing with." The first slide revealed the full financial audit. $52,000 stolen from community funds over 18 months, including money allocated for playground equipment that neighborhood children never received. Angry murmurs rolled through the room as parents realized their kids had been robbed. The second slide showed every forged document Brenda had used to intimidate elderly residents. Fake condemnation notices, fraudulent inspection reports, entirely fabricated legal threats meant to force vulnerable neighbors out of their homes. But the final slide was the moment that shut down every remaining skeptic in the room. "This is footage from inside my house while I was attending my grandmother's funeral," I said, clicking play on the high-definition video. "Watch what your innocent HOA president did while I was burying the woman who raised me." The room went dead silent except for the low hum of the projector as Brenda's crimes unfolded in crystal-clear detail. Her directing accomplices to dig through my personal files, her photographing bank statements and medical records, her slipping my grandmother's wedding pearls into her designer purse while mocking my supposed mental instability. And then came the moment that erased any lingering sympathy, Brenda holding up my grandfather's Purple Heart medal and laughing as she told her accomplices, "Veterans always hide the valuable stuff. Let's see what else this hero has tucked away." The silence afterward felt solid like concrete. You could hear someone gasp, traffic passing outside, even the faint whisper of autumn wind against the windows. Mrs. Elise slowly stood, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had endured 8 years of systematic abuse. "Brenda Hutchinson, you are a thief, a liar, and a disgrace to this community. Leave our neighborhood and never return." The applause that followed exploded like thunder rolling across mountain peaks, growing louder and more relentless until even the news cameras couldn't ignore it. Brenda ran from the community center in tears, her high-priced attorneys scrambling after her like abandoned luggage at a collapsing airport. Outside, Channel 7 captured her final public meltdown. "This is a witch hunt. A military conspiracy. You'll all regret supporting this psychopath." Her rant was drowned out by the voices of 53 neighbors finally free after 8 years of tyranny, celebrating justice and the return of their community. 6 months later, Brenda Hutchinson was serving 18 months in federal prison, and Willowbrook Estates had become the kind of neighborhood people dreamed about. Her guilty plea came quickly once federal prosecutors explained that mail fraud alone could carry 20 years. The scope of her crimes was staggering. $73,000 embezzled, 47 documented cases of harassment, 12 counts of elder fraud, and enough proof of corruption to trigger statewide HOA reform. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, her assets seized for restitution, and her reputation destroyed so completely she became a cautionary tale among law enforcement. The woman who once terrorized us was now earning minimum wage in a prison laundry, learning what powerlessness actually felt like. But the real victory wasn't Brenda's fall. It was what Willowbrook became without her. Mrs. Elise flourished as HOA president, turning meetings from hostile battlegrounds into cooperative gatherings where neighbors solved problems together. The stolen funds were recovered and used as intended, playgrounds filled with children's laughter, new streetlights making evening walks safe, and a community garden where everyone grew what they loved. My wildflower garden became a neighborhood landmark, featured in Colorado Living magazine as a model for sustainable native landscaping. Purple lupins and orange paintbrush that survived Brenda's vandalism now bloomed alongside plants added by neighbors who'd learned the joy of working with nature instead of fighting it. The scent of flowers, the sound of children playing, and the sight of neighbors actually talking created an atmosphere that felt like the America I'd fought to protect overseas. 3 months after Brenda's sentencing, we hosted the first annual Fair Governance Day in the same community center where she'd been arrested. Local attorneys offered free legal clinics for homeowners facing HOA abuse, teaching rights people never knew they had. Over 300 people attended from across the state, with media coverage that sparked similar events elsewhere. The impact was immediate. Colorado passed laws mandating financial transparency and limiting arbitrary HOA power, and other states followed. Soon, pulling a Brenda became shorthand for behavior that led to serious legal consequences. But the most meaningful change was personal. Standing in my grandmother's garden on a cool autumn evening, breathing in roses and wildflowers while watching Mrs. Elise teach kids about native plants, I finally understood what she'd meant about not letting bullies win. It wasn't just about stopping one corrupt HOA president. It was about protecting communities that lift people up instead of tearing them down, power that serves instead of controls, and ordinary citizens who refuse to surrender. The Martha Kellerman Memorial Garden Fund now provides scholarships for veterans pursuing legal careers, ensuring future Brenda's face opponents who know how to dismantle corruption legally and completely. 3 recipients are already in law school, driven by the same principle that guided my fight. Overwhelming evidence defeats overwhelming arrogance every time. Last week, I received a letter from a military family in Arizona facing the same harassment tactics Brenda once used. They'd read about our case and wanted help building their own federal complaint. I spent 3 hours on the phone sharing every strategy that worked in Colorado. By the end, their HOA president was under state investigation and facing possible criminal charges. The ripple effects of one community refusing abuse were spreading nationwide like wildflowers taking root in good soil. So there it was, Brenda serving 18 months in federal prison and an entire neighborhood transformed. And here's what still amazes me. For 8 years, grown adults were terrified of a woman with a clipboard. Veterans, seniors, families all tiptoeing around fake authority and a bad attitude. Marcus stopped playing her game. He documented everything, knew his rights, and treated her actions for what they were, actual crimes. Her tiny kingdom collapsed overnight. I guarantee many of you know your own version of Brenda, a power-hungry manager or neighborhood tyrant. So here's the question. What if you stopped being afraid? What if you started recording, demanding transparency, and fighting back with facts instead of fear? Because the truth is simple. These people only have power if you give it to them. Hit subscribe if you're done letting petty tyrants get away with it, and leave a comment with your story because someone else needs to hear it. The moment you stop fearing someone who thinks they're important is the moment you realize they never truly were.